order. Welcome to meeting numbers of Common Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I'd like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name, and when you are not speaking, your microphone should be on mute. As is my normal practice, I will hold up a yellow card for when you have 30 seconds left in your intervention, and I will hold up a red card for when your time for questions has expired. Please keep your screen in gallery view so that you can see the cards when I hold them up. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on November 5th, 2020, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology is meeting today to continue its study on the economic recovery from COVID-19. I'd like to now welcome our witnesses. Today we have Mr. Robert Lyman, Principal Trans Policy Research Group. We have Ms. Josipa Gordana Petrunik, President and CEO of Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium. We have from the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers Businesses of Canada, Veso Sobat, board member. From Mother Step In, we have Laure Waridel, co-instigator, et Émilie Robert, enseignante en biologie de Rouen-Noranda. Et de le Conseil de l'industrie forestière du Québec, M. Jean-François Samré, président directeur général.
As well as Michel Vincent,
des marchés et du commerce international. And from Tavos Industries, Mr. Alexander Kung, Director of Sales and Business Development. Each witness group will present for up to 5 minutes, followed by rounds of questions. With that, we will start with Mr. Lyman. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, honorable members, thank you very much for inviting me to appear before the committee to offer evidence in support of the committee's study. After briefly describing my background, I will seek to aid the committee's study by addressing 3 subjects: the definition of the clean energy sector, the direct and indirect costs of the green initiatives and related measures, and the experience to date concerning the income and employment benefits of the environmental and clean technology product sector. My professional experience has been almost entirely in analyzing and advising on the public policy issues related to energy, environment, and transportation. I spent 37 years in the federal public service, serving under 22 different liberal and conservative ministers. I spent the first 10 years of my career in the Foreign Service with postings to Caracas, Venezuela, and Washington, D.C. After that, I served in 5 other departments, mostly in economic policy areas. I retired as Director General, Environmental Affairs at Transport Canada in 2006, and subsequently spent 10 years as a consultant to federal and provincial government departments on energy, environment, and transportation issues. Madam Chair, I am sure that the committee is aware that the subject that it has agreed to study is very broad in scope. It's important to define what these practices, or more precisely, activities and investments involve. Statistics Canada has offered one definition in the statistical reports that it has issued since 2007 on the environmental and clean technology products sector. The sector includes the companies engaged in producing a wide range of products and services. The products include electricity produced from renewable energy sources and nuclear power generation, wind, solar, and hydro generation products, equipment for spill response and remediation, biofuels, and others. The services include waste management and remediation services, environmental assessment services, energy efficiency consulting services, engineering and construction services, and others. The sector thus includes almost everything that reduces the environmental effects of economic activity. Much of the clean technology goods subsector relates to the production of renewable energy equipment and electricity generated by wind, solar, and biomass energy. It's important to understand the costs of these goods. I cannot possibly do justice to that subject in a 5-minute statement. I will say that the capital and operating costs of wind and solar energy generation represent only a small share of the costs that they impose on the electricity generation and transmission system. With respect to the direct costs to consumers, the committee should consider Ontario's experience following the passage of the Green Energy Act of 2009. That legislation authorized Ontario's independent electricity systems operator to offer feed-in tariffs at above market rates for renewable energy generation. Further, the province guaranteed those rates for the life of the contracts, generally 20 years, and required that the renewables production be granted first to the grid rights over less expensive sources of generation. The Auditor General of Ontario, in her 2015 report, found that from 2004 to 2014, the portion of residential and small commercial customers' bills recovering electricity generation costs increased by 80%, from 5 cents per kilowatt hour to 9 cents per kilowatt hour. The overall cost of electricity to consumers increased by 56%, from $12.2 billion in 2004 to $18.9 billion in 2014. Between 2010 and 2016, monthly electricity bills, including taxes in major Canadian cities, increased by an average of $37.60 per kilowatt hour. During the same period, prices in electricity bills in Toronto rose more than twice as much. The annual average household cost of electricity in Ontario rose by 120% from 2009 to 2016. According to Scott Luft, an expert in Ontario electricity markets, the cost of the Green Energy Act contracting is now over $4 billion a year, or $80 billion.
Lyman?
Yes?
That is the 5 minutes. If you could please conclude.
That's 5 minutes already? Okay, I would recommend that the committee lend its support to the establishment of a federal government energy framework that stimulates profitable investment in capital formation, increases the emissions intensity, reduces emissions intensity, supports research and development, and provides a planning framework long enough for new technologies to develop the competitive advantages that will allow them to succeed in the marketplace.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to Ms. Petrunik. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm Josipa Petrunik. I'm the President and CEO of the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium. It's a long name, but we do go by QTRIC. QTRIC is a special kind of nonprofit organization, and I'm going to start off today by giving you a sense of some of the major projects we've launched that have had an impact on the economy and which give us a pathway forward for the green recovery that as Canadians we all want. So at QTRIC, we're the only organization in North America today that represents members from the transit sector, the manufacturing sector, the electrical and natural gas utility sector, the academic sector, and the software and technology sector. When you put that all together, it means that as a nonprofit, we basically do technology projects. And so we operate a lot like a technology startup in terms of our innovative and creative thinking. And that's exactly what's needed in order to transform our current transit and transportation fleet into a low carbon smart mobility economy for Canadians. Insofar as we're focused on transforming the transportation and energy matrix that defines how Canadians move, the transit and mobility options we have available to us today, and the pollution and operational costs associated with those options, QTRIC is really aligned with the goal of establishing Canada as a leader in low carbon smart mobility technology, innovation, design, and deployment. And based on that unique structure, we have been able to design otherwise impossible projects and launch them in Canada today, which is proof of the potential of the green economy that this country can build post-pandemic. We've already been able to help make the country a global leader in the design and deployment of several key low carbon smart mobility tech projects. As an example, several years ago, when it wasn't popular to do so, we were able to pull together leading transit agencies, manufacturers, and utilities to launch the Pan-Canadian Electric Bus Demonstration and Integration Project. And that launched in TransLink in Vancouver, in Brampton Transit in York Region, north of Toronto, and it had competitive manufacturers, Nova Bus and New Flyer, both electric bus manufacturers in Canada, with Siemens and ABB, both high-powered charging system manufacturers with significant footprints in Canada. These kinds of projects also integrate the utilities. In this particular project, we integrated BC Hydro and Newmarket Power Distribution as utilities in a global first to demonstrate for the first time in the world that you can create interoperable standardized electric bus technology in Canada, deployed in Canada, and attract foreign direct investment in this space. We are leading similar projects in hydrogen fuel cell bus integration in this country right now with Mississauga and a data partnership intended with Winnipeg Transit. And we're leading an effort to get small autonomous low-speed shuttles out the door in Markham and in Stratford in order to make sure that there's transit not only in our urban communities, but in our suburban and rural communities as well. From coast to coast to coast, not only our membership and our staff, but also our board of directors recognizes that the large-scale procurement and deployment of electrified transit systems using battery power, hydrogen fuel cell technologies, and renewable natural gas technologies, along with autonomous and connected shuttles, will create hundreds of thousands of jobs in this country, which it's already doing. And we know that by integrating data analytics and cybersecurity into these systems, we will be fostering the growth of clusters of high-paid jobs in a competency that is needed worldwide. So in sum, low carbon smart mobility is a critical area for Canadians. The use of shared smart mobility in mass transit systems has certainly dipped during the pandemic, but not to be fooled, it is critical that we recognize transit is coming back. There is no doubt our cities will come roaring back, and we must recognize that even pre-pandemic, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Toronto, Brampton, Quebec City, Montreal, we're already struggling to move enough people over enough distance to advance our economy efficiently from both an economic and human quality of life. The pandemic has actually given transit agencies the opportunity to breathe, the room to prepare for complex technologies like zero emissions, connected, and autonomous data-driven technologies. Cities are not going back, transit is not going back. The expectation is that the federal government will be a partner in the effort to build a better life for Canadians. Without good mobility systems, we would be otherwise failing our people. And this is both for urban and rural communities. The government's already taken promising steps with transit investments in the clean sector economy. This has been critical, $15 billion in permanent transit funding and $2.75 billion in dedicated ZEB technology for zero emissions bus. But it is complex. Over time, it does save money. And so in conclusion, I'd like to note that investing in the greening of our transit systems will create jobs in the economy. It is already doing so. I am proof of it. My team is proof of it. And the hundreds of companies and organizations we represent across this country are proof of it. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to be able to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Mr. Sobo or Sobat. I don't want to massacre your last name. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I really appreciate it. My name is Ves Soba, and I'm an engineer with IPEX headquartered in Oakville, but I'm a board member of the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Businesses. I like to call us the Coalition of Job Creators, and I'll be speaking on behalf of the coalition in my testimony today. We will share 3 suggestions on how to unleash Canadian entrepreneurship and help make this decade Canada's decade. And suggestion 1 concerns trade with the US. USMCA, or CUSMA, as we call it, has been very helpful in many respects. But contrary to common belief, it does not protect us against Buy America. Canadian companies continue to be blocked on U.S. federally funded infrastructure projects, while American firms have unfettered access to Canada. Ironically, the company I work for buys American all day long. Our products are made from American resin. Natural gas that's sent from Canada makes its way to the US and is cracked into ethylene and combined with chlorine and salt to make pellets that are used in long life building construction products like siding, windows, soffits, decking, fencing, pipe, and of course in the medical sector in a very big way, and of course in the auto sector in a very big way. Last year, 18% of US vinyl resin production came to Canada. China was America's second largest customer at 10.1%. Mexico was third at 10%. This year, we expect Canada to be the biggest customer for America, bigger than China and Mexico combined. So we have leverage. If you recall, Prime Minister Harper successfully secured an exemption to Buy America back in February of 2010 with President Obama using leverage. We think it's time for Prime Minister Trudeau to do the same with President Biden, especially now when there's a shortage of construction products in the United States, and the two are ideologically congruent in many respects. It's in America's best interest to use Canadian products rather than Chinese. Canada shares best practices and has some of the best environmental credentials in the world, focusing on green infrastructure and Canadian solutions to U.S. problems is the key to an exemption to Buy America. An example of that beneficial Canada-U.S. relationship can be found in Burton, Michigan, just outside of Flint. After careful due diligence, Burton removed its water supply lines and replaced them with 19 miles of Canadian innovation by actually oriented lead-free vinyl pipe, which conserves resources by using significantly less material, reducing its environmental footprint, and still providing the high strength. The pipe was made by IPEX in Saint-Laurent, Quebec, just outside of Montreal, using Unifor labor, and installed by LiUNA members in Burton. So Burton now has cleaner water, minimized its environmental footprint, and saved $2.1 million USD for its taxpayers. And indeed, a 2018 study, American study, showed that Canadian break rates for vinyl pipe were best in class, inferring there's a great benefit to Canadian municipalities to use innovative Canadian technology for infrastructure. Suggestion number 2 would be, many of you have seen the poll this week that says 74% of Canadians believe government debt is too high. We believe one way to lower that debt is to unleash entrepreneurs, especially those who export. Consider incentivizing exporters by exempting them from, let's say, the carbon tax, and watch the debt problem be reduced over time. Suggestion number 3, another important thing that can be done to help is to stop the attack on plastics. Environment Canada and Climate Change is poised to declare plastics any moment now, when in fact, plastics toxic any moment now, when in fact, it's classic overreach and it's not toxic. And it is in danger of killing Canadian jobs in every sector. It's creating a chill that already is driving investment out of Canada, when all that's needed is an effective, coordinated provincial litter strategy. So in conclusion, we urge the committee to help, number 1, secure an exemption to Buy America. Number 2, incentivize Canadian job creators to export. Number 3, stop self-inflicted wounds like the ones that would declare plastic toxic, which it's not. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. With that, we will now go to Mère au front. Vous avez la parole.
Mother, step in, and you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I'm Laure Waridel. I'm an eco-sociologist, associate professor at the Institute of Environmental Sciences at UQAM, and I'm an author and co-instigator of Mother Step In. Just recently, my granddaughter Theodora will be 29 in 2050, a key date when it comes to ecosystems and climate change if nothing is done. So I, along with my colleague Émilie Robert, are presenting this morning. I'm Émilie Robert, and I'm a biology teacher in Rouen, Rwanda. We are speaking today as mothers step in, a movement of mothers, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers from all walks of life, united to protect the future of our children. We are more than 5,600 throughout Quebec and beyond. 25 groups are active locally, demanding political courage from the municipal to the federal levels. In Canada, we are working with other groups. We believe that to protect the future of our children, we must protect the environment and social justice. That is why, for months now, we've been calling for a fair and green recovery and offered our elected officials the document 101 Ideas for Recovery, taken from the Pact for the Transition attached to our presentation today. If we want to protect our children's future and avoid new crises like the one we're experiencing now, it's urgent to transform our economy. We have to do more. We have to attack overconsumption and waste. We've known for a long time that the planet's resources are not infinite and that the capacity of ecosystems to absorb our waste is limited. Thus, unlimited growth in material and energy consumption in a world of limited resources is mathematically impossible. We must rethink the way we meet human needs. It's up to our governments to put in place the rules of the game necessary. And you, who are elected officers, need to work to support what will contribute to gradually reducing what will destroy life on Earth. So here are some concrete ways to move from words to action. Emily? Sorry, it's my turn to continue. So we would like, as elected members, you have the power to act to ensure that Canada is a real climate bill. It is imperative that we improve Bill C-12 on carbon neutrality so that measures are in place that will force us to meet the targets set by science. And as soon as possible, not in 2050. Canada needs to have accountability and transparency in place as soon as possible. From now on, all decisions made in the federal government must be screened for their impact on the climate, and this must happen from coast to coast to coast, north to south. A real climate test should force the government to immediately stop all fossil fuel subsidies and divert itself of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. According to the official figures, the government has invested more than $30 billion in subsidies to the fossil fuel sector. That's equivalent to $800 per capita. And that's not counting Trans Mountain, that will cost taxpayers $12.6 billion in the next 3 years. Right now, our government is funding the destruction of our children's future. This money must be invested in the ecological transition of the economy. The Canadian governments directly support workers and communities dependent on fossil fuels to move into solution mode. Second, focus on eco-taxation. Another key measure must be implemented to true eco-tax policy. We have to introduce polluter pays principle, and this will create incentives to invest and disinvest in order to reduce the ecological footprint. Since the wealthy typically consume and pollute more than the less affluent, they would have to assume their fair share of responsibility. The government's carbon price policy is a start, but producers' extended responsibility for their impacts on the environment and society must apply to all economic sectors and all types of pollution, not just greenhouse gas emissions. So I've exceeded my time, unfortunately, but I just want to call your attention once again to the fact that we're grateful you've invited us, and we would like you to take measures that will truly take into account the future of our children and your children and all our grandchildren. Thank you. Next, we have the Quebec Forestry Industry Council, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to all members of the committee, and thank you for inviting us to contribute to your thinking on the green economic recovery. My name is Jean-François Summery, and I'm President and CSO of the Quebec Forestry Industry Council, which represents sawmill, veneer, pulp, paperboard, panel companies, and engineered wood manufacturers. And today I want to dwell on the importance our sector can play in economic renewal, but also that it is an essential player given the fight against greenhouse gases. And we need to be able to deliver our sector's full potential on these issues to support efforts in innovation and contribute to achieving objectives. 70% of municipalities in Quebec are where our sector is active, so we contribute to the economy in amount of 142,000 jobs, as well as 500,000 in input. And PricewaterhouseCoopers conducted a study and showed that every cubic meter of wood processed, governments receive 115 in revenue tax, or 4.5 billion in annual revenues. Therefore, investing in forestry is a win-win. It's a win for the economy, and it's a win for the environment. A number of international studies show the importance of an active and responsible forest industry, be it the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, or it be the Food and Agricultural Organization, or even the UN International Renewable Energy Agency and Natural Resources Canada. They all show in their reports this win-win situation. So we are grateful that the federal government's investing more than $3 billion over the next years to plant 2 billion trees. But some of these trees need to be harvested to allow for sustainable forestry to make the most of the different variations of this carbon-neutral product. When a tree is cut and transferred into boards, it traps its carbon longer than its counterparts left alone in the forest. In other words, when we use wood as a building material, we extend its CO2 retention time. It replaces other building materials such as steel and concrete, which consumes up to 34% more energy and emit up to 81% more greenhouse gases. So the challenge is huge for our industry. And it's the case in the U.S., Canada, and elsewhere in the world. The U.S. Commerce Department, unfortunately, is imposing countervailing duties on lumber imports of Canada. The WTO concluded its final reports that Quebec respects the rules of international trade, and we hope that the Canadian government will use the conclusions of the report to demand an exemption for countervailing duties on wood products from the public forest and an exclusion of companies that source the majority of their wood from the American side. When it comes to innovation, the pulp and paper industry is innovating and changing. It is dealing with new adhesives, and other innovations have been announced in recent months. The use of cellulose masks, for instance, have been manufactured to fight against COVID, and other hygiene products are now used in hospitals. So we would like our sector and universities to continue to be supported so that our sector can continue to be a leader in the new green economy. In conclusion, resorting to biomass fuels for heating needs to be doing by enhancing the sector And in conclusion, it would be in the government's best interest to greatly improve the very popular investment in forest industry transformation, the IFIT program. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Next round of our next presentation will be by Mr. Kung. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the members of the Standing Committee of Industry and Science Technology for the study on the economic recovery after COVID-19 and for having us here as a witness today. My name is Alexander Kung. I am the Director of Sales and Business Development here at Tavos Industries. I actually wanted to take this opportunity today to share our experience this past year as a rather young company while navigating through the pandemic. Tavos opened up its business in late 2018 as a manufacturer of paper alternatives. Our short-term goal is very simple. We just want to educate and aid our own community in transitioning away from single-use plastics. Long-term, we would like to see a complete halt of these single-use plastics by 2025. And we stepped into full manufacturing of green consumer products and packaging that would hopefully make a dent in our annual 3 million tons of plastic waste. We know that Canadians only recycle 9% of this plastic waste, and we do need to do better. We were very happy to see the government plan to ban single-use plastics back in 2019, and we do urge the Canadian government to not delay this any longer. One of our next plans is to diversify from paper alternatives to bamboo products as well. We have several projects in our pipeline that target different single-use plastics in our common household in the next following years. And unlike trees that take decades to come to fruition, bamboo is a fantastic alternative to single-use products. Now, I also want to touch on our experience as a younger company this past year, as we also did enter into a completely different new industry. When the pandemic began last March, our business essentially collapsed alongside the hospitality industry when hotels, restaurants, and bars were forced to close. This was very devastating for us, having to lay off a significant number of our employees and not knowing whether or not we would survive post-pandemic. We decided to temporarily pivot. Sorry, one second here. We decided to temporarily pivot our business to manufacturing hand sanitizer and other PPE to assist in the massive shortages that we saw in our community. This was very challenging for us, not only as a young company entering a completely different market, but operating with 30% of our staff capacity and realizing the complete market domination of imported PPE. As we started to manufacture our first PPE product, which is hand sanitizer, we witnessed hundreds of thousands of bottles thrown away around our community, and we believe that there should be a better alternative to this. We decided to take it a step further and ditch the use of plastic bottles, and we spent our first few months innovating and pioneering the first ever single-use packet of sanitizer, which is made of 95% paper material. We are on track to manufacturing a 100% completely biodegradable packet that can also hold sanitizer as well. As Canadians continued to purchase more, the demand for higher quality domestically made PPE grew, and there were many instances the past year where imported sanitizers contained traces of mercury, lead, or methanol. This is very toxic to human skin, and more recently, the imported mask in Quebec that contained graphene, which, if consumed in consistent or large amounts, could result in some lung damage. All these problems resulted in an influx of new Canadian manufacturers, and the industry itself did flourish. We partnered with members of the Canadian Association of PPE Manufacturers, or CAPM for short, which is a rather newer association that employs over 1,000 Canadian PPE workers that aims to ensure that Canadians would never again be vulnerable to shortages of PPE during a time of pandemic or otherwise. We have also partnered up with several Canadian PPE manufacturers across the country to share our own resources and accessibility to certain products. We also partnered up with a company that manufactures air snipers, which is a very effective air sanitation device that uses UVC technology, which is tested and proven to kill COVID-19 in December 2020. The air sniper is also a Canadian product. It's also manufactured in Alberta. It is a highly impactful solution that we have here today that can allow our companies to open safely and help jumpstart the economy. And Unlike other air sanitation devices, it also produces zero ozone. We do recommend that the Canadian government not delay the ban on single-use plastics any longer, look inward when procuring for PPE, as Canadians are now more than capable in supplying domestic demand, and implement technologies like the air snipers to help transition to opening our businesses safely and hopefully the final phase of this pandemic. Thank you, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will start our round of questions. Our first 6-minute round, we will start with Député Généreux. Vous avez 6 minutes.
MP Généreux, 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for attending. Ms. Barida, I want to begin with you. We have already met. You had a residence in my riding on l'Île Verte in Notre-Dame des Sept Couleurs. So, Madame Varidel, just so I make sure I've understood, the Liberal government has come across with 45% reduction of greenhouse gases by 2030. Is this realistic, is my first question, while knowing that we have not achieved the targets that we'd set in the past, and we continue to have an increase in greenhouse gases in Canada, and Quebec has become the province with the biggest consumption of SUVs. So there's a contradiction there. We say we're very environmentally oriented, but how can you explain these contradictions amongst Quebecers? Thank you very much, Mr. Généreux, for your questions. Can these targets be realistic? I think what's unrealistic is that we're not really dealing with the greenhouse problem issue in a much bigger way. We need to be focused more and be inspired more by the Scandinavian countries. 2050 is not their target year for carbon neutrality. It needs to be sooner. So carbon neutrality has to be seen as a race that needs to be won as quickly as possible. And the question we should ask ourselves is, when the United States and other big players decided they wanted to get to the moon, do you think they asked the engineers how far we can go? No, they said the objective is to get to the moon. So now we have to find the means and develop the technologies and do whatever is necessary to achieve that goal. So that should be our mindset if we want to protect the future of our children. We have to be listening to science, which we are not doing at this time. Do you not think we are paying attention to science? There are already many changes, and at every meeting we talk about this. We do know we're going to need oil for another 30, 50, 60 years minimally for transportation, heating, and for all kinds of other reasons. I think that industry is adapting and making significant changes. Do you acknowledge those changes? I do recognize that efforts have been made, especially with the circular economy, which we were not even really able to mention, but is in our written brief. We don't want to lose anything, but you have to do more than that. We do a lot of talking, but greenhouse gases increase. And when you examine the different sectors in the Canadian economy, greenhouses continue to grow for the fossil fuels and the oil. So we need to invest rather than and not waste energy. You gave the example of SUVs. That's an excellent example. We have to find ways to deal with the problem. With transportation, we have to find ways not to use so much oil. And if we continue to invest in pipelines and maintain them for decades, when now is the time that we need to win the race to carbon neutrality. It's a question of quality of life for our children. We have to look elsewhere, and we have to refocus our objectives on what matters most to us, which surely is our children. Someone said earlier we're killing jobs. Yes, but what we're doing is killing the future of our kids right now. That is what we do when we buy a pipeline. That's what we do when we subsidize fossil fuels. That money should go directly to support workers. How many workers could we subsidize full-time to adapt to new jobs in the clean energy sector? Madame Waradel, I understand that's the objective. We can all be in agreement with moving towards carbon neutrality and, a clean climate for our children. I have children and grandchildren too. And I salute what your organization's Mothers Step In is doing. And I do also think that we're as responsible as you. The idea here is that you can have grand objectives. But when I look at the reality, it's the consumers who can make the difference. You talk about governments, yes, but there's awareness raising at the individual level, and I'm making great efforts in that regard every day. I now operate a diesel-fueled car, which is good for the environment. Thank you very much. I can't answer that. No, I apologize. Time is limited, maybe in the next round, especially since Monsieur Lemire will come back to these issues.
MP Amos, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. I won't waste any time. C'est un enjeu tellement important.
It is such an important issue for all of us. And I would like to put the emphasis on witnesses Samri and Wardell because my riding is in the Pontiac, and where we have a big forestry sector. On the other hand, my riding is extremely progressive. And Ms. Waridel, you might recall my former role as a lawyer fighting for justice and with Équiterre and all the fight around Chapter 11 of NAFTA, etc., etc. So I do understand this balance with between regional economic development and the shift to a green economy with, of course, the natural resources. But, of course, you have to change institutions, legislation to arrive at the vision that your organization is inviting us to consider. And I would like to send you an invitation. I'd love to meet with you another time. Now, my question as a role of Parliamentary Secretary for Science, the government has just announced, which is historic, it's never been seen before, a fund of $8 million to invest in a green shift for industry, be it cement, be it steel, forestry. This is funding that is available via this fund to arrive at net zero. Now, what are your concerns and what are your suggestions regarding the management of these funds, the criteria for these funds? What are your suggestions in that regard? Because this is very concrete. So what do we do with this money in the budget? I talked earlier, so I'll ask the gentleman to answer first, and I'll add. Thank you very much, Ms. Waridel. For Pontiac, I think diversification is important to develop new products. So the IFIT product is mentioned in our brief, 55 million in the budget, but that's not sufficient given the popularity of that program. There is a huge demand, many people knocking on the door, and some projects are approved, but there's just not enough money to satisfy that. We talk about the 8 billion. Yes, it's all very well, but 8 billion for the entire economy is, once COVID has ended, is like you've inviting your neighbors over and say, "I'll, buy a case of beer. I'm paying. Serve yourselves." Now, maybe that's too strong a statement, but 8 billion for an entire economy is a good start. But more needs to be made available, and needs to be, you also need to do a life cycle analysis and also take into account employee retraining. This is fundamental so that products that are developed really provide winners. Look at Sweden and what has been done there. There are many companies there that have become leaders because of government support. But the Net Zero Accelerator Fund does not exclude industry. So you're focused on IFIT, but that doesn't mean that there are other opportunities. I agree with you, Mr. Amos. But the fact is that because it doesn't exclude anybody, it is available to all. So 8 billion is just insufficient. Thanks for your question, Mr. Amos. 8 billion, when you compare it to the 30 billion that had already been made available to fossil fuel energy sector from the beginning of the pandemic, I think that it's not the right way to go if you want a genuine green recovery. So there are important choices to be made. And I would support the fact that to take good decisions and avoid causing problems for other sectors, you have to base yourself on life cycle analyses that take into account the impacts, the problems and solutions in the life cycle from extraction right through to post-consumption, because sometimes you come up with what you think are good solutions, but they're not. Think of the nuclear as being a solution. So even if there are few greenhouse gas emissions with nuclear, you're generating other problems which will end up affecting our children. So you have to take into account the science, do life cycle analysis, as well as use the principles of a circular economy, so where you're really reducing at source. Thank you. Time is flying. I would like to invite our witnesses after this discussion to consider sending in some recommendations on this net zero accelerator. Thank you very much.
Lemire, vous avez 6 minutes.
MP Lemire, 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to salute Serge Bouchard. We've just learned of his death, and I think that in the context of a study on a green economic recovery, we can learn a great deal from him about how we can cohabit with the indigenous and take into account our entire history. And I hope that we can make his message live for a long time. I just wanted to share that news with members of the committee. My question is for Mr. Samre. The Quebec Forestry Industry Council, you talked about using resources coming, from the forestry ground and so forth. If you want to increase budgets for fundamental research and the resources for third transformation, do you think that's enough for developing a bioeconomic in Canada? And what do you think about the IFIT program you talked about? What should be improved in the program? Well, that's a very broad question for 5 minutes. Maybe my colleague Michel Vincent could join us. I would start by saying that biomass forestry is ridiculous. You cut a tree, you take the trunk to make boards, but you still have other residue. So you want to use added value with panels and maybe eventually bioenergy. So it's to really replace fossil fuels. It's a plus for the economy, but you do need to be careful, and we say it in our brief. We have to talk about additionality, that is added value. You cannot cannibalize. If you close a panel plant to then start up some other type of plant, over the life cycle, you may not have improved the situation overall at all. So you need to be very careful about what you do. R&D and the UBM pulp and paper plant, for instance, with government support, has developed biodiesel fuel. And if you look at UBM's financial statements, I invite you to do it. Do your homework and see for yourselves. You'll see that the biofuels is the cornerstone of the company's business. They took a residue that used to be burned to now develop a product that meets a social need. So investment in R&D is fundamental, and the role of government to create markets to be able to attract the products is fundamental. The armed forces in Canada, they are a huge purchaser of goods, and they could increase their share of biofuels. That's something the government could take into account and leverage to the United States is doing it, and I don't see why Canada would not do it. As to the IFIT program, look at Pontiac or the Gaspé. There are forests. Everybody understands that, those the trees need to be harvested, but you have to also be very careful with what you're harvesting for construction and what's left behind. So there you have panels that are made now to avoid infestations and so forth. And the IFIT program for this company said it's a great project, but there are too many people before you. So this is a good example of the program just not being properly funded. Yes, there are many programs with closed envelopes that limits innovation. You never know when innovation can happen. I have a question. What would be the benefits for forestry companies? What could be done by the federal government to foster the use of wood with, carbon neutrality being a criterion?
Comme je vous mentionne, est un produit qui est carbonégatif dans le secteur de la construction.
Carbon neutrality is neutral. It helps reduce GHG gases with construction. You can have, we have a maple leaf on our flag, but perhaps we need to show how important forest industry is in the construction, the Montebello Hotel or the Canadian Alpine Club. But what about public buildings that are supplied in wood? Maybe it would display our pride. So when we talk about the fight against climate change, what should the government do to extend the program that we've won regarding countervailing duties? The government needs, with the associations,
Ce dossier.
Merci beaucoup. Our next round of questions will go to MP.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to our witnesses. I'll go to Ms. Paternick. With regards to the budget, what was I guess the opportunities that you see out of potentials from that? I mean, it has to be passed, and then there's a second budgetary bill that needs to be passed in September, but do you see any opportunities for transit out of the budget, and what are they?
Yes, thank you very much for the questions, the member. I appreciate it. There's some very obvious opportunities that were articulated as far back as the speech from the throne and now the budget that has emerged. It's very clear based on our calculations with our transit agencies that if you do want to get to zero emissions transit technology and get to zero at the municipal level, it's going to cost about $4 billion to get to the first 5,000 and therefore about $12 billion to get to all 15,000. The budget did identify 2.75 billion essentially for ZEB technologies, and within that, the 15 billion in permanent public transit funding. So there's no doubt that that is a significant way forward towards those capital investments. That has been identified. Some of the elements within that, though, are the nuanced items that we'd like to identify, building on some of the comments already articulated. Throwing money at the problem won't necessarily solve the problem if people don't know what to buy. And in the zero emissions transit world, it is complicated. It is complex from a technology standpoint and an energy system standpoint. So we have advocated for the idea that a small portion of that should go towards feasibility studies, something along the lines of a small amount, such as 10 million, which doesn't sound small to a Canadian, but in the grand scheme of things, in a budget like the one that we've seen, it's a relatively small amount that would be allowed for transit agencies. There's about 20 of them in Canada that need to run their feasibility studies so that they know exactly what kind of battery electric bus to buy, what kind of fuel cell bus to buy, and what kind of fuel supply chain. So that's a small amount. We've also identified the need within that 15 billion of permanent funding or the 2.75 billion announced for ZEB, zero emission bus technology, that about 10 million be allocated to data analytics. This is a new area for transit and technologies in the public fleet domain. Generally, they don't collect data in real time about the energy performance of their systems. And you didn't need to when the world was diesel and you could waste energy going up a hill with the heating turned on, accelerating. Terrible energy efficiency, but diesel was cheap enough you could do it. Now you can't waste an electron. You cannot waste a hydrogen molecule because you may run out of power in the middle of the day. And so the only way to assess that is data analytics. The only way to do that is a small amount of funding there within that program for telemetry devices, loggers, and a data analytics program for transit. So those are some of the opportunities we foresee. The signals are positive. It's now just the devil's in the detail and the nuancing.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't want to be, I'm going to move to Mr. Semry, but the problem is this, is, I mean, we've got lots of signals on childcare, pharmacare, a series of different things. And so when you have expenditures that are crossed over, you know, almost a decade of spending, it's a real challenge. But I'm glad you mentioned about the analytics with regards to the data and all those things that haven't really been compiled before. And they are really important, especially with climate differentials and so forth and expectations for consumers, and moving them to public transit is part of information gathering that really needs to be, you know, a confidence builder for people, because then they have a lot more strength with those things in mind. Real quickly to Mr. Semry, with regards to the closure of we talked about this last night on the Investment Canada Act report that we did, the closure of Lowe's, Rona from the buy-up from Lowe's. Any comments in terms of like how that's affecting our building and our opportunities now for you know, our communities? Because I see that the lack of competition is an issue, but perhaps you might have a different perspective.
If you don't mind, Mr. Massé, I would let our chief economist, Mr. Vincent, answer the question.
That's fine. Whatever works is good.
Thank you, Mr. Massé. Well, actually, we still haven't got an idea on the subject because the news is too recent, if you like. But all in all, I don't believe that this is going to make a huge difference on the price of software because.
Désolé, Monsieur Vincent, avec le son.
Excuse me, Mr. Vincent, the quality of your sound is insufficient for the interpretation with the microphone you're using.
The interpretation with that microphone.
So, what do I do?
Well, I'll go on to a different question because it is a health and safety issue for our interpreters. So apologies to Mr. Vincent, but the reality is that their interpreters, it disrupts and they have a tough enough job as it is. So I'll maybe go back to the transit question because there's more there, and I can follow up offline for questions. And thank you, Mr. Vincent, but it is important for a translator. Back to when we were talking about the data assembly. What are the concerns, or what are the issues if you've worked on privacy? Because that's one of the things that pops up with regards to collecting information in confidence amongst users is privacy. So is that baked into some of the work that you're doing right now? Because I see that as an issue. It's almost like a distraction, but at the same time, it is important to cover it off. So perhaps you can provide a little information about that.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. It's a perspicacious question, and certainly it's the first thing that comes up when folks think about Sidewalk Labs and that boondoggle and everything that unfolded from that. When we talk about data analytics in the transit and transportation world, whether it's bus, coach, or truck, we're really talking about impersonal analytics of the machine. So it's putting the loggers on the machine, on the bus, the coach, the truck, in order to determine how many units, how many kilometers is it going per unit of energy. What is its efficiency on the powertrain? Is the motor performing at the efficiency level that the operator expects it to? We put loggers on the chargers to know exactly how many electrons are coming from the grid and making their way through to the battery pack and being lost on the way, because all of that adds up to dollars, and those dollars add up to lost millions of dollars when you're talking about a complex transition to this kind of energy system. So the issue of personal data is a non-issue right now because the data analytics we're talking about is analyzing the bus, the charger, the energy storage device, the fuel cell stack, the hydrogen electrolyzer, the inanimate objects that perform the actual propulsion or the energy system. Is it possible that over time in the creation of such a data trust, one could identify opportunities in obtaining the consent of riders in order to also track them in the interest of transit? Yes, that is hypothetically a possibility in the future, that if a data trust were set up led by transit and communities, that there would be merit in potentially in the future asking Canadian riders if they would consent to having their data tracked. But the primary reason for doing that would be to hand back benefits to transit riders, in the sense that where you ride, how you ride, and the time you ride should give you some reward or price deduction in your transit ride. That's an issue for a few years from now. The big issue right now is the performance of the energy systems.
Informed consent, and I see the red card is up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now start our second round of questions. Our first round goes to MP Dreeshen. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I must say that I was a little nervous with the data trust to track people. But hopefully it's a long time from now before that happens. The discussion this morning, we've heard plastics versus no plastics. We've heard responsible resource development versus no oil and gas, no pipelines, even though there's pipelines going in all over the world around us. Ethically produced oil versus ethical coffee is something I talk about. Our push for electric vehicles, of course, it results in a push for mining in Canada. My concern is, the not in my backyard mentality, where we're going to have activists that are no doubt be against Canadian mining interests when we get to that stage. It's easy to talk now about how we should be able to build, build batteries and storage. It is very critical. And again, as someone that was a school teacher for 34 years, I think it's important that we prepare our children, not scare our children. And I think that's really something that we should be taking a look at. So to Mr. Lyman, there's a lot of public information concerning environmental damage that a transition to sources of energy like wind and solar would create. Mining for raw materials, as I had mentioned, is going to increase. We've had to build out and expand a whole new infrastructure made from hydro dams and wind farms. So do we believe it makes any sense to turn our back on the traditional sources of energy? And what are other countries like the US doing? Are they abandoning their fossil fuels?
The short answer to that question is no. I mean, the point that always seems to get lost when talking about energy transitions is that currently 84% of the energy that is consumed in the world is based on fossil fuels. And only 5% is based upon renewables. About 2% of that is wind and solar. So these are very new energy sources that are a long, long way from being major sources of energy supply. And even if one can move to achieve more efficient or more diverse sources of energy supply in the world, it will take time. Vaclav Smil is a professor of geography at the University of Manitoba and the foremost expert in the world with respect to energy transitions. And he estimates that a major energy transition of the type that's being contemplated now would take 50 to 70 years to conclude. So these transitions are occurring all the time. They certainly are possible. But the key question for governments is to what extent they attempt to accelerate the pace of such transitions when doing so requires extensive use of regulations, taxations, and mandates.
And I think, if I might, I think that's one of the key components. We have the natural resources, we have the technology, we have the ability to create those products that we have in a world-class manner. And if we want to shut ourselves down, of course, that simply means that it's going to be taken up by others. And I think you probably are aware that the Danish economist Gord Lomborg notes in one of his books that even if all of the signatories to the Paris Agreement met their global greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets, there'd be no measurable decline in global warming, but trillions of dollars of public funds would be wasted, making people he refers to as green crony capitalists rich. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, I mean, Bjorn Lomborg is an expert and someone who believes that humans have a role in the warming of the planet, but that there are far more important problems for the world, and that the cost of the transition that's being talked about is far too high.
Thank you. I see that the yellow card is there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to MP Erskine Smith. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair. I want to begin with the Urban Transport Research Association. Many of the recommendations I see in a recent report, some relate to federal governments, provincial governments, municipal governments, and I wonder, given the level that we're at, if you could focus in specifically as it relates to what your views are on recent initiatives via the budget and the fall economic statement, and what more you would like to see the federal government move on going forward, keeping in mind federal jurisdiction.
Thank you very much to the member. So the first thing that I'd say about that, and I'll give a little example to highlight it, is the signals going forward in terms of the investment in public transit are critical and they're great. But what needs to be refined out of that? Well, as an example, the real pressure coming from our industry partners and our transit partners is that investment from the federal government needs to be partnered with municipal investment. And that's not so much a dollar figure, that's a philosophical issue around how the Federation will work with our cities going forward to transfer that money to them, to the transit agencies. The big issue that has come up is if any of that funding flows through provinces, it's going to become highly problematic, become a bottleneck, not get deployed, and certainly not achieve 5,000 zero emissions buses by 2024, 2025. So one issue there is the philosophical issue and the constitutional issue of how to work with the cities and transit agencies directly to deploy that money. If that can be achieved, then we do know in agencies across this country, from TransLink to London to Quebec City, there's about 24 cities that are ready to roll. And so the second point of recommendation is if there is a way to get the funding to the cities and transit agencies quickly, it won't be all cities and transit agencies that are ready to absorb it on day one. And so if we try to do the Canadian thing of spreading the peanut butter thin and handing out some money to all cities with transit, it's not going to be effective in achieving our transition goals or the 5,000 bus goal. Instead, what has to happen is a focus on those 20 to 25 cities and transit agencies that meet 3 KPIs. One, their municipality has passed a climate action emergency or a ZEB target, which means city councillors and mayors are not going to be the obstacle. They're already philosophically and politically aligned. 2, the agency has already deployed on its own dime or in partnership with the province or federation, a pilot or first procurement of buses. Trying to send millions of dollars or tens of millions to a city that has 0 buses right now is not going to be the the fastest way to deploy the money effectively. So there are about a couple dozen agencies in Canada that on their own dime over the last 4 years, when it wasn't popular to do so, and it was very complex and difficult, actually deployed buses already. And that's TransLink in Montreal, in Toronto, in Calgary, and Edmonton, et cetera, and Laval and Grand Prairie. So some of the smaller cities too. The third KPI is that the agency has to have a feasibility study done. In previous funding from PTIF to ISIP and other kinds of federal funds, there was no requirement that the city or transit agency show up saying, hey, we did the physics and the mathematics. We know what kinds of buses, charger systems, or hydrogen fueling we need. Instead, money was deployed, and often with a high pressure timeline. And the result of that was we did get procurements, but they weren't the best procurement for that community. Nobody wants wasted tax dollars. So the third KPI is target the initial tranche of funding in the next 24 months to those cities that have done the feasibility studies, the transit agencies in cities, that have a climate action commitment at the council or regional level, and that have already deployed at least a pilot or initial procurement. The second tranche of agencies that follow soon after are the ones that haven't deployed a pilot or initial procurement, but have the feasibility work done in the climate action commitment. If you use those three simple KPIs, we will get to 5,000 ZEBs. We will transform the industry. We will retain investment by New Flyer, Nova Bus, and ABB and Siemens and Ballard and Hydrogenics and the other players in this industry that right now are being pulled to California and they're being pulled to Europe because of major procurements there. And if I may,
and can I ask just when you talk about flowing dollars directly to municipalities, that would be welcome from my perspective. You mentioned delay challenges and provincial bottlenecks. Correct. Is there also just a concern that it may politicize the issue in some contexts? And if I look at, transit planning in Toronto, you have a lot of work that gets put into transit planning, and the premier does Ontario line on the back of a napkin and tears up years of transit planning. So sure. What is that a concern as well?
I should clarify, I should say not just municipalities, but municipalities and regionalities, since York Region Transit, TransLink, they are regions, right? Look, I can't get into the ontology or eschatology of our transit investment. I don't think there's a transit dollar in the history of Canada that has not been politicized at some point in the past. Fair enough. But will it be effective? Yes. The cities and the regions are the most effective absorbers of the fund and most effective deployers of those funds if we're serious about climate action. If we're not, spread it anywhere and go through the provinces.
Thank you. And I am out of time. Thanks very much.
Sorry about that, MP Erskine-Smith. We will now go to Député Lemire. Vous avez 2 minutes et demie.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to mention that in 2050, my boy Léon will be 40 and Jules will be 38. And as a citizen, I've participated in Mother Step In Noranda, especially in regard to some of the activities around the gas pipeline. And I've met Emily. I would like you to talk about your suggestions in your report. And are there any other sectors, circular economy, mobility? What else do you have to suggest? Emily, would you like to say what you were unable to talk about before? You're on mute. I apologize. For transportation and of people and goods, it's important to consider land use, also introduce 4-day work weeks, telework, but reorganizing land use to encourage public transit. You want to foster local purchasing, all kinds of measures. We made some points in our brief about the circular economy. We believe in, electrifying vehicles and transportation, but there's more to be done to reduce the environmental footprint. Actually, every step in the life cycle, extraction of raw materials right through to the very end of the life cycle. So reintegrate used product, reintroduce in the economy, and apply the 5 R's: reduce, repair, use, remanufacture, recycle, and of course use renewable energies. Agribusiness, you also want to reduce our footprint there. So we need to change our habits from the field to the plate. We have to invest in infrastructure and never forget that there are experts. We want to preserve biodiversity. And if we do the right thing, we'll be able to prevent new pandemics, because there is a relationship with biodiversity and the appearance of these new diseases. So by destroying biodiversity, we're destroying ourselves. Thank you very much.
This goes to MP Massey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lyman, what's your evaluation with regards to the investment in the auto sector in Canada versus the United States? I'm just kind of curious as to your perspective as to where things are at right now, and if there's missed opportunities, where can we actually take advantage of?
To tell you the truth, I don't follow general investment trends with respect to the automobile industry. What I have followed to some extent, of course, is the investment in electric vehicles. And there recently, of course, there's been a major funding of a Ford plant near Oshawa. I think it's $170 million to increase the funding there. There's no doubt that there is a major movement both within Canada and the United States to increase the investment in and capacity to produce electric vehicles. But beyond that, I'm sorry, I don't have details.
No, fair enough, and thank you for that. There also was an investment into Michigan, but I appreciate that. A sincere answer, and it's appreciated. Maybe I can go back to again. I do have another question with regards to transit. It's one of the things that we see at a city like Windsor, where we're trying to move our transit, numbers up, and it's an auto city. But is there any suggestions in terms of what we can do for public relation wise to move things along? It's one of the things that seems to be missing from the recipe of trying to get more people on transit. It's not just like transit or car. It should be a multi thing. We've even put bike racks on and so forth. But I'm just trying to figure out how to push this issue further.
Thank you very much, Mr. Massey. And if there were time, I'm happy to answer the auto question separately. Now, on the transit side, I'll say there's three things: jobs, operational savings, and market position. So in terms of jobs, one of the ways to position this at the municipal and larger level in terms of adopting these technologies is the fact that we've already identified at QTRIC that there's over 264,000 jobs in Canada to be retained in the zero emissions transit landscape, and another 30 to 98,000 to be created. So it's a good job story for Canadians to push forward. But on the ridership side, in terms of getting people into transit, we have to price roadway. There's no other way around it. You're going to have to price roadway to drive the marketplace. And that is a fair dialogue to start having.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to MP Lewis. Welcome to INDU. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's an honor to be here. And thank you very much to all of the witnesses for appearing today. Some fantastic testimony. First question will go to Mr. Sabat. And thank you very much for your business. I understand through the CAM committee that I'm on that you actually produce pipe that is resistant to some extent to earthquakes. So it's pretty special. I think that's fantastic. And I also understand, sir, that 70 associations have sent a letter to USTR trade representatives complaining that Canada may be breaching NAFTA by doing so. How did the industry get an exemption last time, and what opportunities could be leveraged now?
Interesting. Thank you for the question. Last time, the government was very aggressive in selling their story in the United States. And essentially, they found out who the proponent was of Buy America inside the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. They found out that really that proponent was had access to the Canadian market unfettered, but the proponent was most worried about China. So in discussions with them, the government had great discussions with them. Our bureaucrats did a fantastic job. they were able to secure a letter signed by the proponent that says they were fully supportive of the Canadian exemption. That letter was given to the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister passed that on to President Obama. And that was very instrumental in getting a Canadian exemption to Buy America. There's always opportunities that can be leveraged in order to, when negotiating with the Americans. And certainly green infrastructure is one right now. The Americans are very concerned as well about our nuclear waste that's up at the Bruce power plant. And they have indicated that they would be very willing to dispose of that in Michigan. We should and could use that as leverage in order to exact the Canadian exemption to Buy America. That's something they want. We want something. There's no reason why we can't come to some sort of an agreement. There's many, many, many other examples like that. And Mr. Lewis, you asked about our innovation. We make a pipe that is earthquake resistant. It's called Binax SR. It's made in Saint-Laurent, Quebec. And it's sold all up and down the West Coast in the United States and Canada. And that's another example of Canadian innovation fixing an American problem. And I really believe that that's what we should promote with the Americans. We should be working as a trading bloc, not working against each other.
Thank you, Mr. Sabat. Through you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sabat, for that answer. Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Lyman. I'm really fortunate. I am the Auto Caucus, Conservative Auto Caucus Chair for the Auto Caucus, I guess. And I guess it goes like this. I did hear what you had said to Mr. Massey with regard to, you're not really driving into auto, but you did speak a lot about EVs, electric vehicles. I will tell you, I had a conversation yesterday with the Canadian global auto manufacturers industry, and they are on track for 2030 for some 121 electric vehicles. However, in the meantime, they said that we still need pipelines. We need them desperately. And so I'm wondering, sir, with regard to Line 5 and not losing jobs and keeping the economy going today, I'm wondering what impact short-term would having Line 5 shut down do in our economy as we still strive towards zero-emission vehicles?
Well, the shutdown of Line 5 would remove something in the order of 60% of the refined product supply for Ontario, and therefore significantly increase prices. There may be some ways in which, hopefully there are ways in which some products, gasoline, aviation fuels, etc., can be brought into the province by rail or by truck, but that will definitely be more expensive. The ultimate answer to a permanent shutdown of Line 5 is only the construction of an additional pipeline into the area, and that would clearly take years to achieve, given the difficulties that other pipelines in Canada are having with permitting processes today. And so, it would probably increase prices considerably. One of the things that's always been typical of transportation fuels is how energy inelastic they are. That is, they're relatively unresponsive to significant increases in prices.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lyman.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to MP Jacek. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses today. We often speak about diverse views, and I think today we've had some views that might almost be described as polar opposites. My first question is to Mr. Kung, and first of all, I want to congratulate you on your entrepreneurial spirit and your ability to move to where the market is. So my first question is, have you been able to take advantage as a small business owner or founder of any government programs through the pandemic and what that meant for your business?
Currently, we did reach out. We did apply for one of the grants. That was, I think, in December 2020. That did help us kind of innovate a little bit more. But in terms of any other government fundings, no, we really haven't received much or applied for much of those.
Actually, we've heard from other witnesses that small and medium-sized enterprises actually have quite a difficult time navigating what the opportunities are. So I'm wondering if you have any recommendations for the federal government in terms of the economic recovery going forward as a small business. Could you give us some ideas that could help your type of business?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of a business of our size, a lot of our pain points is, especially as a new business, is getting notice, getting making an impact, especially at a scale of what we operate as. We would definitely like to see more access to funding. That's definitely one thing we would like to see. But we would also like to touch on a little bit more of the Canadian companies that we actually partner up with. There are so many wonderful Canadian company owners here right now that where we manufacture PPE and other green products, and a lot of us do look for these requests for proposals that the federal and the provincial governments do release for bids and tenders. Unfortunately, a lot of us do get overlooked in terms of our competitiveness and the prices that we can offer. And a lot of these are awarded to imported products, imported straws, imported take-out containers. Everything is very hard for us to compete, especially with the labor and the wage that it costs for us to even manufacture one straw. Like, for example, an imported straw from China can cost less than 1 cent or half a cent, where for us to manufacture just one paper straw on Canadian soil with Canadian labor, it costs us about 7-8 cents, which is very hard for us to compete. Although we do kind of target a little bit of pain points for like the straw, so we don't just make a regular straw. A lot of the pain points is people drink plastic paper straws and it gets soggy and it's disgusting. You have in your mouth. We did come up with a brand new coating. It is our own trademark coating as well. We have paper straws that actually last in your drink for 8 to 12 hours. So we did target these pain points and come up with new ways to kind of help people move. But at the same time, straws is it's a cheap product, right? But any green solution is a solution.
Thank you very much. Ms. Petrunik, thank you very much for explaining just what QTRIC does. You mentioned some projects in the great regional municipality of York, and I was wondering if you could just describe the process that you engaged in. I believe you mentioned Markham and Newmarket, just so we can fully understand your role in the whole process.
Yes, thank you to the member for the question. So 3 of our major projects are all focused on standardization and interoperability on a technology standpoint, because the last thing the taxpayer wants at the municipal or provincial level is to be forced to buy stuff that only works with one proprietary solution. And that's okay for your Macintosh, but it's not okay when it's a bus. And so our role was really in the electric bus world and the hydrogen bus world and the autonomous vehicles in Markham and York region and so on, to get manufacturers that are competitors together around the table, which is normally impossible to do, get them to agree to redesign their systems in Canada to be plug and play with one another so that they communicate with one another. They can plug into any kind of charger. They have vehicle-to-vehicle comms that are equivalent, and then get champion transit agencies to deploy that stuff. So that is our role. We herd the cats, we get the idea together, and then we project manage and engineer it to a solution to retain the jobs here and show it can work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We'll now start our 3rd round of questions. Our first round goes to MP Polyev. You have the floor for 5 minutes. I'm just looking for him. I don't see him on screen. One moment. There he is. Go ahead,
Yes.
MP Polyev.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Sobat, for being here today. I want to address a few questions. One, in the last 5 years, has your company, the company for which you work, IPEX, opened any plants?
We have expanded plants both in Canada and the United States. Right now, though, we're looking at major expansions in the United States.
How about in Canada?
We've expanded some plants in Canada, but the opportunity in the United States is extraordinary right now. The construction sector is very, very hot, and we're planning on making greater expenditures down there.
Would you say your growth will be bigger in the States than in Canada?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, their housing market is very, very strong. The incentives down there for manufacturers are very, very, very good. So they've had policies over the last 5 years that have been very beneficial for manufacturers to repatriate back into the United States, or they've just been able to attract manufacturers into the United States much more than us. And this is what I suggest for Canada. We should try and repatriate Canadian companies or to expand in Canada in the same way that they've done.
And the cost of electricity in Ontario, has that caused any difficulty for manufacturing jobs in your view?
Absolutely. The cost of electricity in the United States is substantially lower, except for Quebec. Quebec electricity is extraordinary, and we have a number of plants in Quebec, and we take advantage of that. But for the most part, electricity prices in Canada are much, much higher than in the United States.
Yeah. Well, if the Ontario government had any brains, it would have just bought Quebec electricity, which would have made more money for Quebecers and cost less for Ontarians. But instead, we decided, the previous Liberal government decided to pay price markups of thousands of percentage points in order to build windmills and solar panels that are worse for the environment than is hydroelectricity from Quebec. How would you have you noticed in Ontario the price difference for energy since the Green Energy Act was brought into place?
Oh, extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. The Green Energy Act jacked up prices very significantly. We went from 8, 9, 10 cents per kilowatt hour to 21, 22. Some members of the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers are paying 28 cents per kilowatt hour.
So they've more than doubled or tripled. Doubled or tripled.
Yeah.
So this is a cautionary tale when government forces citizens to pay higher prices for electricity in order to subsidize the favored technologies of central planners. What ends up happening is you drive jobs and business out of the jurisdiction and into lower cost energy jurisdictions like the ones where your company is expanding the greatest. Is that a fair statement?
Very fair statement. Canada has so many resources, it seems that we're our own worst enemies. We are restricting our market opportunities. We are putting in obstacles all over.
Right. Well, this gatekeeper economy makes it harder to get things built. When you do get it built, you have to pay higher energy prices to subsidize trendy and well lobbied for energy companies. And then if you can manage to run a profit after that, you pay higher taxes. So it is no wonder that we're losing our manufacturing base to the United States and to other foreign jurisdictions. Speaking of the United States, we don't have a lot of time, but just so I can summarize, under previous government, Stephen Harper was able to garner an exemption to Buy America. Has this government garnered an exemption to Buy America so far?
Not yet, no. And Mr. Pulver, I think you remember how active the government was in getting that exemption. You participated in some of that. We'd love to see the same thing right now.
Be good for jobs. They failed on Buy America. They have failed on softwood lumber. Now they're failing on keeping Line 5 open. Final question. Can you give a list of essential products and services that would be illegal if the government bans plastic as a toxic?
Well, the problem with banning or calling plastics toxic is that you'll have to label the products as they cross the border, and they all of a sudden will become a hazardous good. And there's no way that this needs to be done. The issue is litter. The issue is not toxicity. There's no scientific study that shows plastic is toxic.
Thank you so much. We will now go to MP Johari. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for their testimonies today. I'm going to go to Mr. Kong. Mr. Kong, welcome to our committee. You, in your opening remarks, you talked about that as one of your recommendations that we should look inward. And in discussing that, you also highlighted that you're working, or Tavos is working with the Canadian Association of PPE manufacturing executives. Can you share with us what do you exactly mean by looking inward?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the question. So looking inward, I mean for specifically with tenders, a lot of awarded bids are always awarded to companies who have either imported either from China or India, especially with PPE in those regards. And you have a list of 30 to anywhere to 50 local manufacturers here, right here in Ontario as well, where we all do have a little network between ourselves and a company, a very larger company that can import these at a fraction of our cost. Are ones that always do win. But the problem with that is we see a lot of problems with the quality of PPE that actually gets dispersed towards the general public, such as Quebec with the graphene masks. Those masks contain graphene, and it wasn't concluded yet, but graphene is not meant for people to inhale in a consistent or large amount, but it somehow ended up 164 million masks were sent around all throughout Quebec to staff, students, and that was a very, very large problem for us. And all of that could also have been avoided if we actually looked inward and we actually purchased Canadian masks, which so Caplam actually invested over $100 million collectively in creating, PPE machines, ventilators, and et cetera. And if we actually paid a lot of more attention to what we have right now on our own Canadian soil, I feel like we can avoid a lot of these problems.
Thank you. Do you think, based on the data that you have, that we have the capacity to be able to not only fulfill the demand of Canadian, but also be in a position to be able to export? Can you share some data around that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the companies that we partner up with in Caplam is Canada Mask. Canada Mask is also a very new company right here in Richmond Hill, located actually 5 minutes from our warehouse as well. They do have the contract for $250 million for the entire government of Ontario. I am helping them in terms of scalability and exposure for their products as well. They can manufacture anywhere between 3 to 5 million masks every single week. Anthony, which is the CEO of Canada Mask, is a wonderful entrepreneur as well. They have plans of expansion that can manufacture up to 50 million masks a week. At that capacity, we can definitely export out some of our PPE as well.
So are you in a position to be able to share the difference in cost? I mean, we know that you talked about the quality, but it looks like you're highlighting the fact that despite the fact that we have sufficient local manufacturing capacity across Canada, not only to be able to meet our demand, but also export, we are still in a disadvantage. Can you share some price points around the difference and why the difference is there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it all comes down to labor. In terms of the price of machine, the price of material, it's all rather the same. Right now, we are facing a massive shortage in containers as well. So the price point for us to import raw materials is very, very high, especially from countries that have the manufacturing capacity, let's say for masks, for 1,000 times more output than us as a small association. Their labor is 10 times cheaper than Canadian labor, and that's one of the only strongest single factors that I can think of at the moment that is a direct correlation as to why we lose and why us as a group of Canadian PPE manufacturers, we do lose most of the time.
So if we could source at least the raw material in a much more favorable price, then the only issue remaining for us would be the labor. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And I believe that brings me to my 5 minutes. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Député Lemire. Vous avez 2 minutes et demie.
Merci,
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to salute our witnesses from Mother Step In. My question is, can a real eco-tax program actually be an incentive to reduce our environmental footprint? What do you think? Thank you very much. Yes, eco-taxation is an extraordinary means to bring the market to more eco-responsible choices. The price on carbon is a good step in the right direction, but we have to go much farther than that if we want to respect science and also improve the environmental situation. So eco-taxation can do what the market cannot do, because right now we're mortgaging the future of our children. So you can see that local organic apple costs much more than Chilean organic apples. So that is a problem. Just in terms of energy costs, you would need to integrate all of these impacts. And with COVID, you can see the extent to which a pandemic can cost so much. And think of droughts and the impact on agriculture. I think everybody here, especially elected MPs, needs to assume their responsibility, and that the first responsibility of government is to protect the health and safety of the people. And at this time, studies show that not taking action is going to result in a very high cost. So even traditional neoliberalists are talking about the importance of the polluter pays. It's time that Canada gets out of the oil sands. We are not listening to science when it comes to the oil sands. So our children will be assuming the impacts. So it's as a scientist and as a mother that I speak here. So I invite you to read the scientific reports. Solutions exist. There is resistance to change, but we can succeed in Canada. Thank you very much.
Our next round of questions goes to MP Massey. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to Mr. Kung, one of the things that you said was any green solution is a solution. And I thought that was a really appropriate statement for what we're faced with in terms of competition. And you also mentioned about labor being an issue. Now, I come from a manufacturing sector, and I believe it's actually important for our not only our jobs and our economy and for the ecosystem in terms of doing better practices, but also too for our sovereignty. But what I'd like to ask you is specifically with regards to our trade agreements and labor practices. The new agreement we have with the United States and Mexico includes labor and environment in the actual agreement. It's not as strong as what I would hope, but it's there for the first time. And can you comment about that? Because what I am concerned about, and I have heard even this from Mexican delegations coming to Ottawa and to other that saying that they don't want to be undermined by lower wages. They don't want to be undermined by the use of the environment being abused to be competitive. They need to be raised up as opposed to used as an excuse to undercut the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I wouldn't say I'm using the expensive labor as an excuse for losing. I think really.
Oh, I didn't mean that you said that. That was okay. Just so we're clear on okay. I don't want that to be okay. The perception. That was just an observation outside of that. But thanks.
Yeah. So what I would really suggest is when it comes to procurement for PPE, I think it's very viable, and it's also workable if the Canadian government actually puts in a made in Canada PPE. I think we're more than capable of doing this. The only thing that we don't have access to right now is nitrile gloves, which is very, very high in demand, very, very short in supply. And it's also because the raw material of latex is completely monopolized by Thailand and Malaysia. But I think if these procurements and these bids really focus on made in Canada products, and companies who actually bid can show proof that we manufacture here, we do the testing here, then we can really start to build up our own economy a little bit better and allow to jumpstart all these Canadian businesses who invented. Sorry, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll now go to MP Polyev. You have 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Ma question.
Thank you very much. My question is for whomever, but it has to do with green energy. One of the witnesses said earlier that electricity in Quebec is cheaper than elsewhere, and it is true. When Quebec developed its hydro, well, in Ontario, the province next door, the rates are much higher, compared even to the price Quebec sells its hydro to the United States. That's not Quebec's fault. Quebec is willing to sell its hydro to Ontario, but the Ontario government decided to purchase its hydro from the wind and solar energy producers at a higher price. We could have been able to buy hydro with no greenhouse gases emissions from Quebec or even Manitoba. But for whichever reason, we in Ontario decided to pay exorbitant prices that force companies such as those from belonging to Mr. Soba and others to transfer his company's operations elsewhere. So what would push a government to purchase energy at a higher price when it's available as green energy here in Canada? Is there anybody who would like to answer my question? Go ahead.
Je vois Madame Petronic.
Ms. Petronic has her hand up.
Thank you very much, MP Polyev. With regards to the question, I'm going to speak very briefly on an application side and leave it to my colleagues on the fuel supply side. But on the application side, it is important to put the fact out there that despite the higher than comparative electricity prices in Ontario and other jurisdictions in Canada compared to our colleagues in the US, when you pump that energy as electrons or as hydrogen produced from an electrolyzer through a propulsion system on a bus, a car, a truck, or a train, it is always cheaper than the diesel or natural gas comparison. And so the reality is, despite higher than normal prices compared to our global competitors, it is important to put the fact out there that on the manufacturing side and on the transit adoption side, those higher electricity prices are actually not a barrier to adoption. And in fact, that relates to the physics of the powertrain. There is no comparison for the efficiency of the electrified powertrains.
Right.
And so I understand it's often positioned as a problem, but in fact, it is not a barrier. And in many provinces like Manitoba, BC, Alberta, and Quebec, it is substantially by orders of magnitude cheaper. So I wanted to add
but if I could, Ontario is producing its electricity by burning natural gas. That's one of the principal sources of electricity in the province. So you can simply pass the natural gas combustion from the vehicle onto the electrical generation, but it's the same effect. We could have avoided that if instead of spending 1,000% more than we had to in order to buy electricity through solar panels and paying 500 or 600% more in order to buy electricity from windmills, we could have simply bought it from emission-free nuclear and emission-free Quebec and Manitoba hydroelectricity. So it's an example of where things have gone wrong to the detriment of the environment and the economy.
If I may, sir, just as a slight fact check on that statement, I understand it is a common assumption that there is a longer tailpipe on electrified vehicles, in particular where there's coal on the grid or natural gas through peaker plants. In fact, we've completed over 30 mathematical and physics studies across Canada. The only jurisdiction in Canada where, given the efficiency of the transfer of energy in the powertrain, the only jurisdiction in Canada where, under very specific circumstances, electrification is slightly more dirty than a diesel equivalent is in the deepest of winter in Edmonton when the bus is full going up a hill, which almost never happens.
Okay, well, in fairness, that wasn't my question. My question didn't relate to electric vehicles. It related to electrical generation. So I regret that we've gotten so far off track, but perhaps someone else would like to address the actual question.
Don't have time. Unfortunately, Mr. Polyev, you have like 10 seconds, but I will let
well, if I guess in that case, we've lost the chance to address the actual question, but maybe next time I would ask.
What was the question?
The question was, why are we spending orders of magnitude more on wind and solar electricity when we could have eliminated emissions through the purchase of hydroelectricity and nuclear?
Unfortunately, you're way over time. Very quickly, Mr. Lyman, literally in 10 seconds or less.
Okay, the Ontario government had estimated that it would gain 50,000 jobs. The Fraser Institute estimates that as a result of the Ontario pricing policies, the province lost 75,000 jobs.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to MP Lampropoulos. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for being here and for providing the information that you've brought us today. And if I may add, I think that Ms. Petrunik's response was brilliant. And so thank you for that. I don't think that was a waste of time at all. I would like to first ask, I guess, my first question would go to Mr. Stobat. You mentioned several times your Saint Laurent plant. I am the Member of Parliament for Saint Laurent. So, you know, I'm glad that we're helping in this transition and in helping make it make things safer with regards to transporting oil and gas while it's still around. And one of my questions, I know that you mentioned that, you know, we have to stop scaring companies away and investors away by saying that we're going to be banning plastics. As you know, and as has been mentioned on this call several times, it's the single-use plastics that will eventually be banned. And what that basically means is plastics that are made up of different kinds of plastic that are not able to be recycled. And the reason for the use of these plastics is so that, well, I know that, you know, for the ones that you find in supermarkets, for example, it's to keep freshness, and it's plastics that are really used in order to maintain a longer life or freshness for certain products. I'm sure that it's used, and different types of plastic that are not recyclable are used for other reasons as well. But I'm wondering what your take is on finding plastics that are more easily recycled and that can help us in our plan to make the environment a bit better. I know that you said that there is no toxic, that there's no proof of plastic being toxic. However, we know that our plants, our fish and our birds eat the plastic. We see that it ends up in our water sources. We see that it's definitely a huge contributor to the pollution that we find all around the world. So if you can comment on this, and then if anyone else would like to raise their hand and comment on it as well.
Emmanuel, thank you so much for the question. And that Saint Laurent plant is a great plant for us, and it's been there since about 1983. And we appreciate the workforce there, and we appreciate the innovation that's come out of there. So, you know, our company recycles about 22 million pounds of plastic a year, and it goes to products that are sold to Home Depot, Rona, Lowe's, the big box stores, and it's used for drainage pipe, it's used for rainwater leaders, it's used in the construction sector. The products we make are long life. Their water mains are supposed to last 100, 200 years. Certainly ours do because they don't rust. The other alternatives have a much shorter lifespan. When we talk single-use plastics, I totally agree with you. Litter is the issue with single-use plastics. And Environment Canada should deal with that as such. The provinces have jurisdiction over litter, not the federal government. So they should work in coalition with all the provinces to make a better recycling program for all plastics. We live in a modern economy. Look around you. It is impossible to ban plastics. Even though the government has signaled that it is going to ban a certain number of them by using a blunt instrument called CEPA, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. It needs to change CEPA so that it can deal with environmental issues without calling for bans. And that's the big error that Environment Canada has made. We're currently in a pilot program with Environment Canada. We collect oxygen masks, IV tubing, and a couple of other plastic products in 5 major hospitals in downtown Toronto. And we recycle that material into longer life products. There are many solutions out there that Canadian companies are providing. There's no need to ban anything.
Madame Waridel, je vois que votre main est levée.
Miss Waridel, I see your hands up. Yes. Let me give thanks for the opportunity for correcting Mr. Sabot. There is science research saying that are toxic effects with certain plastics. Europe has forbidden some of these, recognizing it's toxic, affecting children and babies' health. So there is a need to ban certain types of plastics, those that are most damaging for human health. We need to listen to science, and we also have to really broaden this scope of responsible purchasing. We have to take into account the entire life cycle, and manufacturers of plastic need to understand the impacts of their project.
Yes, Mr. Polyev?
Yes, it just deals with the functioning of the meeting. I'm just curious how we're going to carry on both the witness and the previous member of parliament. We're going to carry on talking in the committee without these headsets that are actually made partly of plastic. We all have the same headsets.
While
They're
I
made of plastic.
appreciate your point of order,
I'm just curious how we're going to
to
speak in committee when these are banned.
MP Polyev, this is not a point of order. Well, I appreciate your intervention. It is not a point of order. With that, it is our time today, and I'd like to thank all of the witnesses for being here today, and of course for your excellent testimony. For those who wanted to also provide briefings to the committee, if you can make sure to get it to the clerk will make sure to circulate it to all the committee members with in both official languages. So I know, Monsieur Vincent, you didn't have an opportunity to speak because of the lack of the headset. So if you would like to submit something in writing to the clerk, we'll make sure that all of the members get it. With that, thank you everyone in the room for making today possible. Merci au service de traduction pour votre travail acharné comme habitude. And with that, I will call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.